Our robot Overlords, automating your Devops workflows. It's a talk that I've perfected over the past 12 months or so. If you've seen this talk in the past, it's not the same talk. Some pieces are the same, but we've added more to it, and it really is a telling of a story. When I first got into web development many years ago, the process for going live or deploying your changes live involved SFTP or maybe just FTP and hoping you remembered which files you changed so that you could make those same changes on the live environment. And then we sort of got into this concept of using version control, but maybe the production servers weren't direct checkouts from version control, so you had this mixed version control, non-version control system. And as time went on and on, what we're building has gotten more and more complex, and the amount of changes that you might be making are very widespread, and the amount of things developers are asked to do on a normal day-to-day tends to increase exponentially as well. And if you ask a developer to do their deployment manually by hand while they're doing 18 other things, you're having a recipe for disaster. So by way of introductions, my name is Brian Thompson. I'm the director of web engineering at a company called Mindgrub. Feel free to tweet at me. They like to have competitions back at work to see how many followers I can get each event I speak at. The record so far is 7. There are more than 7 of you here. We could break that record today. Since they did sort of pay for me to get down here, Mindgrub Technologies is a digital agency with lots of Drupal. We also do Node.js. We play ping pong. We have happy hours, company outings. We're looking to expand. When you give your presentation to the marketing department and you ask them to make sure that I mention the company in it, they like to add lots of pictures about what it is we do. So this is from our ski trip back in February. A big photo of the company. We're about 95 people now. We play ping pong. We have virtual reality. We have a food truck. We go to baseball games. On and on and on. All right, into the meat of the presentation now that we've gotten the sales pitch out of the way. I always like to start this presentation with this picture. I've always started this presentation with this picture. Way back in the early days of building automobiles. Building an automobile is very similar to the way we build websites. Yes, the mediums are different. We're using wheels and steel and metal when we build cars. We use technology and PHP and Drupal or some other languages when we're building websites. But the process is very much the same. We go through one step, then the next step in a very assembly line process. You might start with wireframes, then go to visual design, then move into adding your contrib modules and setting up your content types, and then setting up views and doing your theming. And we lather, rinse, repeat over and over. And as an extension of that, when we go to deploy our website to an environment, let's call it production for the sake of argument, we do the same steps over and over again. Somehow the code gets from where it was, hopefully in our staging environment or pre-production environment, into the live environment. Then we have to revert features, or in D8 we have to import the configuration. We need to flush the caches. Maybe we need to do something else that's a manual step. And as we do that process over and over and over again, it tends to get very tedious. It's very complex. There's lots of detail to it. If you're running drush commands, you probably might not remember exactly what the flag is, or you have it written down in a Jira ticket or some sort of ticket tracking system. It's tedious, and really, we have lots of other things going on. And human beings are not very good at robot work, where we have to do the same things over and over and over again. We just get bored with it. So, what's the solution for all of that? Obviously, we just need to make the robots do the work, which is very simple and very easy, of course, right? Yes. So, this is audience participation part. The microphone, I'm told, will pick you up as well. So I always, when we get into talking about robots, this is actually a picture from one of our clients that we build their website for. It's an industrial manufacturing client. They build pipes and hose fittings. If you somehow consumed a liquid today, which hopefully you did, or you washed your hands, or you were on an automobile, you've used their parts. They make all different kinds of pipe fittings and connectors and couplers to make sure that water and other fluids can get to you, that your cars can run, that we can transport fuel and other things. We've been working with them now for a number of years, and they were very, very old school at the start of things when we first started working with them. It's very much like building a car. When they were building pipes and pipe fittings, they went through the same exact process of everybody stands along an assembly line and we pass the part from one to the next down the line. Now if you walk through their factory, it's all robotics. And they have these robotic arms moving left or right and picking parts out of a bin, putting them into these lathes and other tools to actually make them so that they get that level of precision that they need, so that they have a high quality product for their customers. In the same way, we get robots to do our work as developers for deployments so that we have a high quality product for our customers, the people who use our websites. You look at car manufacturing plants today, you take that one robot, which we had a nice close-up shot of, you have lots of them one and one. Or even on top of that, if we want to look smaller scale, is everybody familiar with the DEF CON conference? DEF CON is they call it a hacking conference. It was just out in Las Vegas over the weekend. This is a robot from that conference which they built to break into safes. It's a couple of Raspberry Pi boards and some 3D printed parts and some motors and servos to just turn the dial back and forth very fast. And when you do that, you take something that would take a long time to enter, a million different combinations to try, 100 for the first number times 100 for the second number times 100 for the third number. You can try them very quick, and they can open safes now in less than 30 minutes. So, when you get home tonight, reevaluate your safes. I've kind of talked about what are some of the benefits of automation. It improves frees developer time to improve quality, skills. It lets us deliver features faster because it takes away things we don't have to worry about. Machines aren't prone to human error as long as they're programmed correctly. And it improves project visibility because you can build in that notification layer with it. So what do we automate? Everything and anything we possibly can, all the way from deploying codes, reverting features, importing configuration, running drush updb, which we might have forgotten to do once or twice before we had all of this, sanitizing the database when we roll a database back. So if we need to bring a production database back into a dev environment or a testing environment so we have more accurate data, how are you actually going through and removing all of those users' email addresses or sanitizing other personal information that's in there? If you're counting on developers to do that by hand, I guarantee they forget, because cloning a database back probably takes them 20, 30 minutes depending on the size of the database just for it to export and import. By the time they get around to it after that's finished, they're already on to the next thing. They've forgotten what they were doing. Easier things like PHP syntax checking. Are we committing PHP errors that are going to throw white screens of death somewhere? Running automated tests. Building and deploying sites via Docker containers with Kubernetes or other container systems. Building your front-end code. Team messaging. This list could go on and on and on. The slide is only so big though, so we'll stop there and keep moving forward. So really, what sort of tools can we use? When I gave this presentation a year ago, one of the big pizzas that we used to talk about was CircleCI. Everybody likes CircleCI. It gives you containers. You can scale up, you can scale down. It integrates very nicely with GitHub if you're using GitHub. Since then, we have switched. We've completely removed all of our code repositories from GitHub at this point at Mindgrub, and we now use GitLab. We do that for a couple of different reasons. One, to pay for GitHub and to pay for CircleCI is now two different vendors we have to work with and hope they continue to play nice with each other. It's in CircleCI's best interest to play nice with GitHub and always have that integration there, but you're dependent on that, whereas GitLab has your code repositories and your CI all built in together. The cost of GitLab is also significantly cheaper. GitLab has a price of 0, which makes it cheaper than whatever you would pay for private GitHub organizations and CircleCI on top of that. In addition to that, we still use tools like Jenkins sometimes to orchestrate deployments depending on the complexity. Travis is another good option out there for those people who have open source projects and prefer Travis. I don't have anything bad to say about that. And then I would also encourage you, based on where you're hosting, to look at what options they have with you. providers like Acquia, providers like Pantheon that let you run scripts as actions are taken on the platform that they're hosting on can provide immense value in tooling to you if you know how to make use of them. If you're still doing your own thing, I would encourage you to figure out how to build those tools into it. It gets a bit more complex, but for those of us at Mindgrub, and my recommendation is generally to find a provider who offers that for you, or build it into your CI layer. And so when we get into GitLab CI and we look at this process, the first thing we have to do is define what it is we want to do. And if you're just getting into this, what I would encourage you, the easiest thing for you to do, and the best place to start, is to run PHP code sniffer every time somebody pushes to your Git environment. Will it catch everything? No. But what we will do is expose a couple different things. One, it will expose if you're committing PHP errors. Two, it'll expose if you're following the Drupal coding standards or not. And maybe you're not because you don't want to, but it at least will bring that to light for you. Three, it gives you a good introduction to how this whole system works with a very low cost of setup. And four, actually getting the PHP code sniffer to run is maybe 2 lines besides all the setup, or 1 line. And that's really where we started. I think a lot of agencies or a lot of developers out there have this question. They hear about automated testing. They want to do automated testing. Everybody thinks Behat is great. I think Behat is great. Getting Behat fully set up, especially on projects you already have built and are trying to maintain going in the future, can be a big time investment to get all of those tests written. And pitching that to clients or to whoever your stakeholders are of, I need to take some time to build these automated tests, is a very difficult argument sometimes for them to make when they're on their schedule of trying to get features or bug fixes out the door. And so the very first step that I recommend you take is to add code sniffing to your project if you aren't already. Even if you have your developers running it locally, adding it to your CI build step process as the very first step, even the only step, brings that to the forefront and lets all of your development team know we care about code quality and we care about following the standards and making sure that people see that. And so a GitLab CI file, which is where you put all of your configuration, looks something like this. Now, what I will say is this is a snippet of the file we run now. But the key pieces you want to look at, and my mouse doesn't show up on the screen for you guys, but at the very bottom, lines 46 through 49. What we're doing in lines 46 through 49 is defining the code sniffer test we want to run. We've included PHP code sniffer through our composer.json file. GitLab CI automatically runs composer install for you when it's running the CI build. You can see above that, we're doing a couple of things, setting up Git so that we can do deployments back and forth, adding SSH keys. You don't need any of that to get PHP code sniffer running. Just focus on lines 46 through 49. That's the base level to get code sniffer to run. If you want to actually use the Drupal coding standards as opposed to the default PHP code sniffer standards, then line 44 includes those standards for you and sets that up. But really, if you just take that little section there and you include it in your project, every time you push to GitLab, GitLab will run those code sniffer tests for you. And once you do that and you have it running for a while, you start to get output like this, or hopefully like this. This is the last set of builds or pipelines, as GitLab calls them, that have run as we push to this repository. You can see all of these right now are green because we haven't committed any syntax checking errors yet, or code sniffer errors yet. And I can even drill into that. So if I want to take this first one and see what the output was, I can just click where it says passed, and that will take me to a screen like this. Now the output's a tad bit longer because you see it running composer install and pulling in all your dependencies. But really, again, it's only the lower third to a fourth of the screen that is relevant to the code sniffing stuff we're doing here. You can see it's taking the commands that we added in GitLab CI and running them for us and showing the output. In this case, we didn't have any coding errors that were found, so it said the job succeeded. If I were to find a test somewhere where somebody had committed some coding errors, it outlines them for you there. And so you can very easily see in this first file, we have a warning that the code after the return statement on line 2365 won't be executed. And similarly, in the second file here, we had 4 errors and 2 warnings. Now, PHP Code Sniffer will try and help you out and say that it can fix these errors for you. Right now, that's still a manual process for us. It's up to the developer to go back and figure out why their tests are, or why the Code Sniffer tests are failing and make the changes necessary. We've talked back and forth about having GitLab CI do that for us automatically and commit it back. We haven't moved forward on that for a couple of reasons. One, fundamentally, we haven't decided that having our CI system right back to the code repository that it's trying to check is a good idea. We don't think it's a good idea. And so we're trying to avoid that. 2, we want to make sure developers understand what code sniffer errors they might be introducing and where they're not following the coding standards. And what you'll find when you first turn this on, and what we found when we first turned it on for our developers, is that there are some coding standards out there that you probably aren't following because you didn't necessarily know about them, or you didn't realize that they existed. And once they're called out to you, you realize that once you're doing them, it becomes second nature. You just didn't know about them in the first place. For a while, we used to write all of our code where the else if was on the same line as the curly brace above. Sites upon sites with code like that. Is it syntactically correct? Yes. Is it readable? Yes. Does it go against the Drupal coding standards? Yes. But you don't know that until you run these tests and you actually see that output and you put a concerted effort into acknowledging that you have those errors. If developers are just running them themselves and they are busy, which they probably are because they're developers, they're just going to ignore those errors and move on. Whereas if it's red and it's showing in the CI pipelines that the build is failing, they're going to be forced to address that. On top of that, the industry has sort of shifted over the past couple of years, 2 years or so, to build complete sites with automation. Gone are the days of Drupal 7 or Drupal 6 or pre all of that, where we committed the entire Drupal site into our code repository. Now, thanks to Composer, we can have what they call a bare repository, which just contains our composer.json and any custom code or custom modules, themes, and so forth in it. And our CI tools will build the site for us. They will install Drupal core and download those files. Any of the contrib modules that are out there, it will pull in as well. This came in fully supported as of Drupal 8.1. For those people who have used Drush Make before, this replaces Drush Make. If you're working prior to Drupal 8.1, there's a Drupal Composer package out there for you to use. One of the big pieces that we found by switching to this system is it pretty much fully eliminates the possibility of somebody hacking core or hacking a module without you knowing. Right now, if you were prior to this, it was always an honor system. Everybody knew, don't hack core. Don't hack contrib modules. Don't change them. Or maybe you move them to a patch folder or you used Drush Make files to set up patches if you really needed to add a patch. But short of looking through the Git history for that particular module, you don't actually know if somebody made a change to that or not. By building sites with Composer where our CI tools are automatically pulling in those modules and Drupal core itself, there's no possibility that a user could commit a change to that file that is hacking core in that way. And so if you're worried about that, or even if you have a project going forward, that's one of the side benefits that wasn't really tangible until we saw it and thought about it. But it is a benefit for you there. Your composer.json files can get a tad bit lengthy with all of this. Drupal now supports packages through Drupal.org itself, so you need to add this repository section at the very top. Then you add in and you require some other scripts if you want, Drupal core 8.0, Drupal console, Drush, any other tooling that you need. This would also be where your modules live, so you might require the meta tag module through Drupal/meta tag. You can also define dependencies in there. And so maybe you want to include Behat and all the tests you need for that. We've started in our projects including Drupal VM For those folks that use Drupal VM, you can include Drupal VM directly through Composer in your repo so everybody has it. You can specify auto-loading and all the other Composer things that you really need. My recommendation to you, if you're looking to get started with this, and the way we got started with it, is you do a Google search for Drupal 8 Composer file, or composer.json, especially if you're looking for one platform specific. I know Pantheon has a composer.json file they recommend starting with. I believe Acquia does as well, which will give you most of this setup. And then we end up reusing it from project to project because the starting point for what we're including is the same. We're always using Drush on projects. We're always using Drupal console. We're always using Drupal core in our Drupal projects. And so as we get through all of this, as I was getting ready to give this talk back in October last year, somebody said to me, so is your talk going to be about chat ops? And I was like, chat ops? What's chat ops? This is about DevOps, not chat ops. And as they explained it to me, they said, chat ops is this process of integrating your DevOps with chat so that they're together, and then you have chat ops. And I'm like, oh, great, another buzzword. And so really when you look at all of this in this automation that we're running, we've got our CI system, which is building our sites and can do the deployments to the various hosting platforms. But in order for people to know about what's going on, there still needs to be that level of communication and nagging. A project manager says, hey, we want to take those features live. We had two options. One, we could either add them to GitLab, which means they have to look through this developer-centric tool, or add them to GitHub or CircleCI, where they have to look through this developer-centric tool that they might or might not understand. Or they had to send us a message and ask us that question, and we had to go and open that tool up ourselves, see what the status was, and then post back and say, yes, we've deployed, or no, we haven't. And so over the past 12 months or so, what we did was we integrated this whole process in with our chat system. And so now anybody in the entire company can deploy sites, if they have permission, through Slack with auto notifications back to that. So gone are the days where a project manager might ask a developer, is the deployment done? What's the status of this? It's all right there in the Slack channel. And so we've got a video here, which I think I downloaded locally, so I didn't have to worry about the Wi-Fi. There you go. So this is a Drupal 7 site that we were working on. It was Star Wars related. And what we wanted to do was add a field to users about the favorite Star Wars robot so that we could track that. That was important to our clients. And so you can see, just like anything else, we have this on our local environment. We open the Views UI. We go ahead and we add that field to the admin view because we had already installed the admin views module so that our clients, the people who are using this, who are managing users, on the admin users page can see username and favorite Star Wars robot right there. That's what they wanted. The client is always right, so that's what we were doing. And so you can see we've gone ahead and done that, and we're saving the view. And so my laptop does not match what's on that screen. And now when we go back to the admin people page, we have that column there. Lots of people who are liking C3PO, R2D2, BB-8, a couple other random droids we had in there as test data. You never know how many Star Wars droids actually exist until you need to add a favorite Star Wars droid to a client site. And you need some test data to test in there. So then what we do, because this is a Drupal 7 site, we're using features, and we use the features builder module to automatically build our features and save them to the file system. This talk isn't about the features builder module. If for some reason you're still building sites in Drupal 7, I highly recommend you check it out. It's called Features Builder. It will automatically build your features for you and separate them out into separate files. We can talk more about it after the talk. It's fantastic. So you can see, if I look through all of this, I have a bunch of files that changed because I rebuilt features through the Pantheon UI here. Where I was working this, I'll add my commit message and add it to version control. Add the devel module, and as well update views to include the favorite Star Wars robot. So this would be the same process if I had a Jira ticket or some other ticket where user story and I had to do this. I've done this. I'm now committing my code And when I get done this part, project manager says to me, hey, is that on the QA environment yet? Can we look at it? The client really wants to see this for their demo this afternoon. And so, excuse me, I switch over to Slack here as I'm getting ready to deploy, and I ping the project manager, and I say, hey, it looks like we're ready to do a push. Are you ready? This gives them the opportunity to say, no, the client's in the middle of a demo right now. They're showing it off to some very important investors. Don't touch anything. Or, hey, the QA team is really slammed. They're not going to have a chance to look at this. We need to hold off. For whatever reason, if we need to hold off, this is their sort of opportunity. And so we ask them, are you ready? Once we ask them and they do those checks, they go ahead and they will reply back. Sometimes these checks take a lot of time if they're multitasking as well. Come on, project manager. Yes, so we're all set. They gave us a key, thanks to this handy dandy key emoji in Slack. And so at this point, we are going to run this custom Slack command we wrote, which is /Pantheon for us because this site is hosted there, which gives us a couple of different options. You can see we can run /Pantheon help to see those options, but really what we want to do is set a default site for this channel. We work on lots of different projects at Mindgrub. Every project has its own Slack channel so that we can have communication in there. What we've just done is associated this Slack channel with a particular Pantheon site. So nobody has to worry about which Pantheon site this corresponds to. It's already preset for us. We then go ahead and we say, okay, Pantheon, go ahead and deploy this from dev to test, all through Slack. And you can see when we switch back to the Pantheon UI here, that triggered that deployment. Now mind you, in this case, it was me, the developer, who triggered this, but this could be anybody on the project who's working on this. They don't need to know how to go into the Pantheon UI. It's all right here, and it posts back for everyone to see that a deployment was initiated by this particular user. So it's fully transparent as to who is starting this off and doing this deployment. In the top right-hand corner there, you can see the Pantheon platform logs going back and forth that triggered this integration. And at the end here, what's going to happen is a couple of different things are going to fire off very quickly. As soon as the deployment of code is actually done, it will post back saying that we deployed, what site we deployed to, who did it, a link to view the dashboard, to view the particular site, what the commit message was. So all of that information is right there. You don't have to worry about what the URL is to the site, finding it in your browser history, hoping you remember. On top of that, Jenkins also posted back, because in this case we had a Jenkins job that triggered at the end of our deployment that did some other things. Maybe it ran a visual regression testing tool or integrated with a third party. One of the challenges with GitLab CI is sometimes you run into timing issues where long-running jobs might terminate early, and so we sometimes offload those to a system like Jenkins to run separately. If I go back to the test site here, as I've been doing, and log in, then when I go to this people page, we should see, if all works correctly, our favorite Star Wars robots there. And so we've now taken this change, which we did on dev, and never actually touched the test environment, didn't have to worry about running drush features revert all, drush config import, any of that. It all was handled automatically for us as we did it through Slack. Sort of a close-up of that output there to see some of the different details. You can see we deployed message, when it ran, the environment, all of that is linked so that users can get right to it. Jenkins posts back that all the tests ran, and so forth. And that was good. That was useful, and that's helped us over the past 12 months. But we continued to look for ways to automate and improve process for things that were pain points, that were monotonous or tedious. And so there is one more thing to this talk, a new piece to this talk, and that's getting everything set up. If you worked on projects, in the olden days, you might have one thing. Nowadays, our projects encompass lots of different tools. We have Basecamp for communication. We have Jira for ticket tracking. Maybe we have Confluence for documentation about the project. We've got the GitLab code repository. We have GitLab CI. We have the website wherever it's actually being hosted, Pantheon. We've got the Drupal site. We've got the Slack channel. If you're doing time tracking, you've got whatever time tracking tool that needs to be set up for that project. Maybe you're using a tool like Gather Content for gathering all your content together and shipping it in. Maybe the design team is working in InVision to do wireframes. And there are all these different pieces that you need to set up for this project to actually work. The way that works previously at Mindgrub is everybody would do it one-off as they sort of got to it. Now, if you've ever worked in Jira, which is what we use for ticket tracking at Mindgrub, one of the things you might know is that permissions are incredibly complex and incredibly convoluted with a high potential for error. And one of the worst things that we could possibly do is set a project up incorrectly such that it's visible to more people than should actually have visibility into it. Or maybe setting up even the GitLab CI in the various configuration tokens we need there. If I need to have my GitLab CI tools have access to my hosting environment through an SSH key, if everybody has to set that up by hand, now I have to pass that SSH key to everybody, and everybody has it. And this resulted in a lot of pain back and forth and a lot of wasted time, because we really have many tools. We make a project in one place, then we make it in another service, and another, and so on and so forth. And so the extension of this Pantheon Slack command, which we talked about just before, is this new tool we've written called Mater. Mater also works in Slack for us, and it is our engineering project setup tool. What do I mean by that? In Slack, we have a single command that we can run to initiate a new project. We give it a project name, and it takes care of setting up the GitLab repository for us wherever that needs to be. It takes care of setting up the Jira project, making sure that it has the right permissions so that it's not visible to everyone in the world. Anything that we need to set up, this tool does. And it's all done by PHP scripts. And so we actually wrote PHP scripts that run the commands for us using a couple of libraries out there to do all of that. It creates all the things. It's interactive with the user. And so if you look at these screens over here on the right where it's a little more evident, you can see it asks you, what kind of project are you starting? Is this a Drupal 7 site? Is this a Drupal 8 site? Is this a Node.js site? Is this something else? And maybe you just want a bare repository without all the other bells and whistles. On top of that, it will ask you, do you want us to set up Jira for this project? Do you want us to set up Confluence? Do you want us to create a Slack channel for you? Do you want us to assign a harvest time code for time tracking to you so that you have it to give out? And it removes those permission mistakes that you could make or that tedious work that you have to do as you create them. One of the other benefits of this, which we didn't realize until we had made it, is that this makes the action of creating a site available to everyone, not just developers. And so if the sales team is actually meeting with folks to sell a project and they're looking to have a quick Drupal demo site that they can show off, they can actually do that through this same tool so that they have a site to leave with our potential client as they're selling it. One of the questions that's asked through the entire workflow is, should we enable the demo content for this site? And if you say yes, then we have a series of drush scripts that run to populate all of that out and enable a stock set of modules to give them that experience. Project managers can fully set things up. They don't have to worry about what the hosting stack is. All of that's taken care of for them. Similarly, on the technical side of things, developers don't have to worry about getting permissions right in Jira if they're trying to set something up internally for an internal project we have going on that might not have a project manager associated with it. All of that's taken care of for them. And so you can see the process is a little lengthy to run, so we don't have a video of it here. Takes about 15 minutes right now for that project to fully initialize as it hits all the various services. The longest part of that is actually running the composer install and pulling Drupal and all of its dependencies in so that we can deploy them. But it tells you, I'm going to get started, and you can go do other things, and then when it finally completes, You can see in this case, this was about 6 minutes later because we didn't have all the bells and whistles we were enabling. It gives you a link to where that site is. So right now, if I'm a demo salesperson trying to demo this, I can make that site, get the link right there, give it to whoever I need to without ever having to involve engineering or developers. This is all done through YAML files. So you just define your services and YAML files and what commands need to be run. And then you write a small bit of PHP code where you extend off of a base class. You write one method where you run those PHP commands to communicate with whatever third party you need, and it takes care of everything else from there. We are in the process of cleaning it up. It got written fairly quickly as a proof of concept a couple of months ago. We've been tweaking it and adding other services over the past couple of months, and now we are anonymizing it in some ways and trying to remove the Mindgrub specificness of it so that it can be out there for the community. If you tweet me and ask me to remind you, or if you tweet my employer, over the next probably 3 or 4 weeks, we will get it out on GitHub so that everybody can run this on their own. It's simple PHP scripts. You can run it pretty much anywhere that handles PHP code. You write 2 Slack configuration pieces so Slack sends your commands to the PHP scripts. It takes care of all of the rest for you. Very easy, very simple, enabling anybody to be able to set up Drupal sites as they go forward. At this point, I'd like to open the floor for questions. Yes, sir.
Can you run the Mater scripts without Slack?
The question was, can you run the Mater scripts without Slack? The answer is yes, more or less. It is optimized for Slack based on the messages it's receiving for Slack. And so part of it is when you go to initialize your site through Slack, you give it a project name, and that payload comes into the PHP scripts in a certain way. But we would ideally love to see it support either other chat providers or even just other systems in general. For us, we're not overly incentivized to have it work with HipChat just because we don't use it or other chat programs, but we wouldn't be against adding that functionality if there are people out there who want it or could help with it.
Great.
Other questions? All right. Well, thank you so much for coming. I will be around for the rest of the day if you want to chat offline. And this was automating our robot overlords.